last video I was watching, and they were dancing around the idea of just having him as a suspect. Not even somebody that's convicted, not even nothing like that, a suspect. We have been covering this topic for so long now, and I know we're still not anywhere close to the end, unfortunately, but today we do dive deeper into the world of David with this new update. The new David developments change everything by Blackie Speaks. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Stanley Live. Let go.
Yeah, you know, police say they now consider the singer a suspect in her death and say they have better information about when she may have died.
Wow.
Now, the new David, spelled D4vd, developments change everything. And I don't say that lightly, because according to sources with direct knowledge of the investigation, this case has now gone to a much deeper place than where it started. We first talked about the David story, spelled D4vd, back on September 10th, when all we had were headlines, confusion, and a...
This is great. Shout out the person who's doing the commentary. Blackie Speaks, very culturally relevant. Why is he saying D4vd after every time he says David? We see it. We see it.
Breaking news alert about a body found inside an impounded Tesla. Back then,
It's AI, is it?
Nobody obviously understood the timeline. Nobody knew who the victim was, and the entire situation felt like one giant question mark, especially because the name tied to that car belonged to a popular young singer nobody expected to see connected to something like this. Since then, a lot has been said, a lot has been assumed, and this has become one of the most confusing and emotionally charged stories I've personally covered on this channel, that's for sure. And of course, it involves a 14-year-old.
It's gut-wrenching. I don't even know if they've had her service yet. I haven't heard anything about how
girl
that's
who
going.
Lost her life.
But dang, bro, it does suck that this is such an ongoing problem still.
Which makes the story even heavier to talk about. Now, my last video on this case, a little over 3 weeks ago, I told you that I'd keep you updated the moment anything significant developed. And today, I'm here to deliver that promise. My goal with this video is to explain why these new details are so significant and how they completely shift the timeline and direction of this investigation. So let's get into it.
Okay,
now, the first major thing we're going to talk about is that David has now been identified by investigators as a suspect in this case. And here's the thing,
finally, oh my gosh, bro, holy. I remember the last video I was watching, and they were dancing around the idea of just having him as a suspect. Not even somebody that's convicted, not even nothing like that, a suspect, meaning they had such a long time before they were like, okay, we'll consider you. That was crazy. Finally, bro, that took way too long.
Official stamp, because they do need probable cause with the help of all the evidence in order to do that on the record, and that's not the case, at least as of right now. So this does not mean that they have enough on David as of today to make an arrest. That's not where things are yet. But it does mean that detectives no longer see him as just someone connected to the car or a person they might want to question later. David is now considered a suspect, and this is pretty major. Up until now, most of the noise around this story came from commentators, journalists, and the internet trying to make sense of what happened. But when that confirmation comes from inside the investigation itself, that's very different. That carries weight. So what does that actually mean? It means investigators are no longer treating him as someone who just happens to be tied to a vehicle where the body was found. Yes, the Tesla was registered to David the whole time, but that alone doesn't automatically make someone a suspect. And in David's situation,
which is crazy, because I don't know how, but I get it a little bit, but I really feel it would make you a suspect with reasonable doubt is what I think. And I feel like now he's just a suspect holistically.
Detail becomes even more complicated because with the level he was operating at, the management...
However, I think he is involved in her death. I'm not gonna lie, I actually don't know. Either way that it goes, it could be he did it and it could be he didn't but was involved, like hiding or something. But I did, in the last video that I watched, I did have a recent suspicion of how involved the mother was with it, in the sense of, this is my like super duper wrong analysis. This is not truth. Nothing about this is factual. This is my understanding of a hypothesis that I formed on my own. So don't sue me. But I was like, you know, in some thinking of things and how interactive this whole situation has been, I was like, Shorty came from a toxic home. The mom was a bad person. David paid off people so that he could be in this relationship with this woman, presumably. And because of that, I started thinking, what if the mom and David had a relationship to where he and her interacted in terms of like paying off so that David could see the mom's daughter, Celeste. And then it led me to, what if something toxic happened within their household, Celeste and the mom, and then the lady turned to David and was like, yo, hide this, or I'm gonna tell people about you and Celeste, and that your relationship was that of one where the shorty was underage. And David being like, I don't want to lose my career over me dating a child, he ended up like freaking hiding the body of the abusive mom, and now is being pinned on him and not the mom. It's a crazy theory that I thought of that I am not like 100% on, but I could definitely see if that happened. I'm not gonna lie, because one thing is for sure, her home was horrible, and it seemed to be something where the mom knew she had a boyfriend named David in the first place. So, you know, it could have been a bit of a blackmailing.
Team around him, the people coming in and out of the places he stayed. We know that there were multiple individuals who potentially had access to his cars, his properties, and his general belongings. So investigators had to look deeper. People lend cars out, people borrow things, people come and go, and detectives obviously know that. They needed more than a registration to take the next step. Now, it does not mean that they've reached a conclusion. It does not mean he's guilty. And it does not mean an arrest is guaranteed or around the corner. But it does mean the investigation has now moved into a different phase. And according to sources with direct knowledge of the case, this wasn't something that happened overnight. Detectives have been working quietly behind the scenes for weeks, interviewing people close to the situation, cross-checking timelines, examining digital information, reviewing physical evidence, and this is the point where they felt like they had enough to place him in that category. And when you look back at how this entire story began, a body discovered inside the front trunk of a Tesla registered to him, this suspect classification becomes one of the most serious developments we've seen since the very beginning. This is the moment where the tone of the investigation shifts. This is when the pressure...
His team lied about him being cooperative with the police at the beginning too. See, all of that is suspect, man.
...increases. And this is when detectives begin focusing in a lot more than before.
That happened months before her remains were found in the trunk of that Tesla on September 8th. And now the source also tells us that pop singer David is being considered a suspect in her death.
Now, connected to the suspect status, there's another major development investigators are focused on right now. Two separate law enforcement sources have told reporters that detectives do not believe this was a one-person job. According to those sources, investigators think a second individual was involved in the effort to dispose of...
And that's kind of what Beautiful was saying earlier, where there's some speculation about somebody being hired to take her out intentionally. It's so much ways that all of this could go, bruh. It's heartbreaking.
Celeste's body during the months before she was found inside that Tesla. One source even said, confidently, that investigators believe that more than one person was involved in the handling of the teen's body in the months before her remains were found in that Tesla, according to two law enforcement sources familiar with the inquiry. So the fact that law enforcement sources are speaking that boldly is pretty crazy to me. So now the focus isn't just on what happened, it's on who else might have played a role in this thing. Who is this other person? A friend, someone in a circle maybe, or someone the public doesn't even know exists? As of right now, we don't have those answers yet, but when detectives believe a second person was involved, that tells you this wasn't one terrible moment or one impulsive decision. It suggests planning. It suggests coordination. It suggests someone else out there is holding secrets and staying quiet, at least for now. Because based on some things that we're going to talk about later on in the video, there are witnesses and even informants already cooperating with police behind the scenes. And this is according to law enforcement sources. So it's only a matter of time before those pieces connect. Now we're left with some heavy questions. How far does this thing actually extend? Who helped and why?
We're probably not gonna figure it out into next year. Like, I'm talking about, like, it's probably gonna extend so far, but by the time that the answers come out, the dust is almost gonna settle in a way. That's what I'm speculating.
If investigators are right about what they're claiming, this case goes way deeper than anyone imagined when the first headlines hit. And the thing about investigations like this is, once detectives have that story lined up, once they connect, the digital evidence, the timelines, and the, witness statements, right? That's when everything can come crashing down very fast. Now, on top of that, there's another major development investigators revealed. It's now been confirmed that David is not cooperating with law enforcement. When this story first broke back in September, every early report, every headline painted the picture that he was in fact cooperating. And to be fair, It was extremely early in the process.
Where did
Detectives
that
had
come
just
from? I think I've seen somebody in my chat say that it was coming from his team. But how does that even work to the news headlines?
discovered the body. They were still identifying the remains, and everyone was simply trying to figure out what had happened. And that was, at the end of the day, the information that was being revealed. So the story was that he had spoken with investigators in some capacity, and he was in fact cooperating. But now we're learning that this is not the case as of right now. According to a LAPD source with direct knowledge of the investigation, the same source who confirmed that he was a suspect, David has not been cooperating with detectives. This information was directly reported to NBC4 Investigates. And this completely shifts the tone of things, right? Because when someone stops cooperating, especially in a case as serious as this, it impacts how investigators move forward, how they gather information, and how they interpret the timeline. It doesn't automatically mean wrongdoing. It doesn't confirm guilt. I want to make that very clear.
But you know, this is somebody that you cared about, and she ended up murdered in the back of your car. You would, I assume, want to be as helpful as possible in getting her justice. You know what I'm saying? That's how, I don't think that's a crazy thing to ask for.
But in the eyes of the investigators, non-cooperation from someone who is now officially labeled a suspect, that is very significant. And typically when someone steps back from cooperating with investigators, they start viewing that person differently, okay? It's very natural. Because in most cases, if someone is purely, let's say, a witness, they're willing to talk. In most cases, not all cases, but in a lot of cases, if they're just a witness, they're going to speak up, right? But in this case, when cooperation stops, detectives have to consider the possibility that the individual may be connected to the situation in a deeper way, which, of course, we know that David was connected to this in some type of way the whole time.
Absolutely.
Now, here's what we don't know, okay? We don't know when David stopped cooperating. People stop cooperating for all kinds of reasons. Let's make that clear, okay? Sometimes it's legal advice. Sometimes it's fear of saying the wrong thing. Sometimes it's pressure, confusion, or simply not wanting to be involved any further. And let's be honest, a lot of people don't fully trust law enforcement in general. Even if you're completely innocent, if the police starts asking you questions, your guard is going to go up. That's human nature. I mean, I know for me personally, if officers approach me in a situation where I, let's say, didn't see anything, didn't know anything about whatever it was that they were talking about, I'd be very cautious too, okay? And a lot of people can definitely relate to that. And another thing to keep in mind is the reality of the music industry. When an artist reaches a certain level, there are a lot of people financially tied to their career. Labels, management, teams, partners. So in situations like this, there's often a lot of legal guidance, a lot of caution, and a lot of protection around what the artist says or doesn't say. That's just how the industry operates. But here's where things take a much stranger turn, because according to investigators, Celeste's death didn't happen anywhere near September. It likely happened months earlier in the spring. And that detail changes everything. According to a law enforcement source who spoke to the LA Times, Celeste may have been dead for months, likely dating all the way back to the spring before her remains were finally discovered in September. And if that's true, I mean, think about what that means. It means there's a massive gap in the timeline that nobody published.
That means that it's, why is he holding a candle? That's odd. Yo, I imagine that it means that it's way harder for them to track what happened to her body because so much time has passed and she like basically started decomposing.
Knew about. So that in itself raises a whole new set of questions. Where was Celeste during all those months after she disappeared? Who was she around? And how did nobody notice something was terribly wrong?
The mom, bro. I'm telling you, how do you not notice your child's gone for months on end?
For that long. Now, yes, she had run away from home multiple times. We know that, which might explain why her absence didn't immediately set off anyone's alarm bells, right? But that's a heartbreaking conversation on its own that we're not going to go into right now. This spring timeline is one of the biggest twists in the entire investigation because it forces everyone, detectives included, to rethink how this happened. Now let's also address something important. A few days ago, multiple outlets, including Rolling Stone and TMZ, reported that Celeste's body may have been refrigerated or even frozen before being placed inside that Tesla. You might have heard about this news, and the reports said that investigators were apparently exploring that freezing theory and that outside forensic experts were being brought in to help understand the condition of the remains. But now we have an official update, and that information has actually been refuted by law enforcement. And LAPD Scott Williams told reporters that the body was not frozen despite what a lot of media outlets had been saying. The LAPD also put up the following statement saying this: the Los Angeles Police Department is aware of the recent stories posted by various media outlets about the David Celeste Rivas investigation and would like to dispel some misinformation contained in their reporting. The body of Celeste Rivas was not frozen when it was discovered on September 8, 2025. she had not been decapitated. Now, the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because the freezing theory actually ended up going viral. A lot of people saw it, a lot of people repeated it, and for a lot of folks, it became part of what they thought was the truth about this case. And this is why I want you to be very careful about trusting every single detail you see online about this situation and this story. Guys, there's a lot of misinformation, a lot of assumptions, and a lot of headlines that don't really match what investigators are actually saying. And I'm not saying that I'm above ever getting something wrong either. I'm human, and if I make a mistake and new information comes out that proves it, I'm always going to come back, point it out, and correct it in front of you, because that's the only way to cover a story like this. It's just the right thing to do. And also, I'm not trying to bullshit you. You get what I'm saying? I have enough respect for you to the point where I'm not going to sit here and lie and make stuff up, and then when I'm wrong, I'm not going to acknowledge it. That's just not how I do things, okay? Now, there's another lead detectives are said to be reviewing, and it points to a location about a 2-hour drive outside of Los Angeles.
Wow.
David's alleged secret trip to Santa Barbara. According to TMZ, who cites
there's secret trips now? Holy.
a source with knowledge of the investigation, a critical part of the case involves a mysterious trip David allegedly took to a remote area of Santa Barbara County in the middle of the night. Now, I do want to point this out. TMZ uses the phrase last spring, while NBC states in the spring of 2025. So there is a bit of a wording conflict in how different sources describe the timeline. That's something investigators will ultimately clarify as they piece everything together. Personally, I'm going with spring 2025 though, because that's what we know, okay? But that's beside the point. If detectives believe the death occurred in the spring of 2025, which obviously that would make sense, then any unexplained late-night travel to remote areas during that same period becomes something they have to look at closely. Does this trip overlap with the window when Celeste disappeared? We don't know the answers to those questions yet, obviously. We don't know what, if anything, investigators found in that area, and we don't know whether this moment ends up being a crucial part of the timeline or just a coincidence that happened during that same period, allegedly. But what we do know is this: investigators are aware of this trip, allegedly, and it's something that detectives are currently reviewing as they try to understand what really happened. And while all this was unfolding, something unusual
Blackie Speeds makes me uncomfortable. he makes me a little uncomfortable.
Happened online. As I was going through the public records like I always do when I cover cases like this, I noticed that the information on the medical examiner's website had actually been completely removed. So there's absolutely no information that you can find about it on the medical examiner's website. Up until this point, no one knew why that happened, but after digging further and reviewing new reports and court filings, now we finally have the answer, and this is the truth about that. The LAPD went to a judge and successfully got a court order to seal everything about this, about this case right here, and specifically in relation to Celeste's autopsy. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Cause of death, manner of death, autopsy results, physical evidence, the entire findings, completely locked away, at least for now. And the reasoning here gets even more intense. The detective behind this request, Detective Joshua Byers, a veteran from the Elite Robbery Homicide Division, he told the court that releasing these details could jeopardize the investigation, not just by showing what police already know, but by revealing witnesses and informants, interesting, who are actively helping detectives. Meaning there are people talking, there are people cooperating, and police believe their safety could be at risk if the truth comes out too early. So what looked like a random website update was actually law enforcement tightening their grip on the case. And the judge, his name is Craig Richmond, he agreed. He granted LAPD's request, sealing the entire file. The medical examiner's office literally had to stop releasing information to the public, every detail locked behind legal protection. Now, here's where it gets interesting, okay? Even the chief medical examiner himself, Dr. Ode Ukpu, who by the way is the first African-American to ever lead that office since it was created back in 1850, he publicly pushed back against this decision, and this is what he said. The practice of security holds is virtually unheard of in other counties and has not been proven to improve outcomes in the legal system. We are dedicated to serving our community with full transparency. However, the law precludes us from doing so while the court order remains in this case. And he actually denied LAPD's first attempt back in September 15th, about a week after this entire thing came out, right? Saying they didn't provide enough justification. But now that justification has arrived and that hold is officially in place. And the LAPD, they're not really denying any of this, right? A captain from the department explained why, and this is what he said. Detectives need to receive the information before the public does, so nothing leaks that could compromise what they're building behind the scenes. Now, when police is fighting this hard to control information, it usually means they're doing, or they're closing in on something or someone they don't want to
like
be
they
tipped
have an
off too early,
idea.
right? And that brings us to another revelation. In these very same court filings, for the first time ever, LAPD officially described this as an investigation into murder. Now, sure, we all assume that from the beginning. I mean, a 14-year-old little girl found dismembered in a truck, in the front of a trunk, I should say. Of course, that's murder, like somebody did that to her, right? But this is the first time law enforcement themselves have put that exact word into the record, right? So they're not just describing this as a tragic death, and it's not an accidental situation or anything like that. It's officially a murder investigation. I think these developments are significant because of what they really communicate. This isn't just police gathering information anymore. This isn't a wait and see situation, that there are people they're actively building a case around and against, and that releasing the wrong detail to the public too soon could jeopardize everything they've been putting together in silence. The LAPD didn't go to court unless they felt they were protecting more than just paperwork. They're protecting their strategy, they're protecting witnesses, they're protecting whatever evidence they've already connected to someone or more than one person. So you can feel the tone of this entire investigation shifting. I mean, they're definitely turning up the heat right now. And you can see that through their actions. This is a serious, targeted pursuit of accountability. And on the conversation of accountability, the LAPD deputy who's overseeing the investigators working on this case, he actually said, and I quote, "Accountability is coming. Our robbery homicide detectives have been working and not waiting for that decision by the medical examiner.
It does make me feel better that they are getting super close to like a final decision.
This is for Celeste Rivas." And then he said the following: "No one is off the table, including him." He's talking about David.
Yep.
So that is one of the strongest public signals we've heard so far in this case.
By the way, David is still posting. He still has the outposting everywhere, so he still makes money. Wow. Auto posting everywhere. Wow. That is crazy in this time that he's still finding support from people.
Confident in,
I do genuinely believe in innocent until proven guilty. I really do. So I get it to that degree, but at the same time, I do believe in discretion. You know what I'm saying? I do believe in taking a step back and understanding that some situations look so crazy that it deserves a moment of freezing. Like a moment of time to itself until like something is clear cut and said, because it is too insane of information to pick a side on right now. It's just like, it's wild.
This. So now the tone from investigators isn't we're figuring things out. It's justice is coming. Someone will be held responsible, and anyone tied to this in any way is being looked at, including David himself. And through all of this, guys, it's very important to remember the heart of this entire case. A 14-year-old girl lost her life. A child should have had years ahead of her. Laughter, memories, dreams, growth, all of it. Sometimes these stories get so big, so complicated,
that you
so
lose the fact that this is the point.
Shocking that people forget there's a real family behind all of this. There's a real life that was lost. A family that wakes up every day without their daughter. A family that didn't get a chance to say goodbye. It's a real tragedy, and honestly, I wish things could have been different for Celeste. Nobody deserves an ending like this, especially not a child, okay? I wish we lived in a world where kids were protected, where they were safe at all times, and where stories like this didn't have to exist.
Amen.
However complicated this investigation becomes, however many updates come out, one thing cannot get lost. Celeste mattered. Her life mattered, and that should always stay at the center of this conversation, okay?
Absolutely.
And I promise you, I will make sure it does.
That's fire. I agree wholeheartedly. I don't want it to get away from the root of what this is, and that is a murder of a young woman who has so much life ahead of her. If you guys have any more information, drop down below. I'm sorry I didn't speak much, but I really just wanted to let the information speak for itself, because as you know, I've covered this so many times, so there's only so much I can say, but I would be remiss if I didn't hop on here and watch it with you guys. So if you guys enjoyed the video, click this video right here. I guarantee you enjoyed that one, and I probably talked in it way more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. With that being said, goodbye.